that. I'm probably just going to put this somewhere above the snowman, and we're going to try to get something that looks like a good falling snow. Alright, now we want to really take a look at properties that will make this look more realistic. We've created the emitter, and now we want to make it look like snow. Right now it's still looking like the party of ping pong balls of different colors, not very snow-like. So let's we have the emitter selected, so let's go into our attribute editor, and first let's take the particles per second down to about 50. The max distance, let's give it a distance of about 10 to kind of spread these things out. The spread's probably okay, we could go a little higher. The speed, I'm going to actually take this down to about 2 and see what things are looking like here. I like it, but it's still a little, I like it a little further out. It's a little too localized, so maybe go out to the max distance and make that maybe 15, and make the min distance maybe 5. And let's it's getting there, but let's go up a little more, and this may be enough. Alright, I think that might be okay for now, and we can always come back and adjust. So we've set the emitter, we can always come back to that, and we've talked about the direction, the max and min distance, the spread, the speed, and the faster that speed is, maybe the further they'll broadcast out. So if I've increased that to 3, maybe it would go, I don't want to go outside of our, because we still have to put a little dome on here. That's getting close. So maybe let's go back to 2. Alright, so in the end, when we put our dome on, we'll make sure all of our snow is contained. So you have an emitter, and then you have the particles themselves. When you select the particle, you don't select individual particles. I can't animate this position of this particle. The position of that particle is handled internally by the physics engine. So you can't animate particles that are already being driven by another system. I can animate the emitter, and I can animate properties of those particles, but I cannot animate their position. But you can still do lots of neat things that would affect how the system animates those. You can animate their weight or mass, or different things, and you can add turbulence fields. So in a way, you can help. You can give the system rules, and it will affect how it animates the particles. But I'm not keyframing individual particles when we mess with dynamics in this way. So just letting you know that up front. So with the snow emitter creates the particle shape. And the particle shape node, I'm in the attribute editor, it gives all the attributes for this particle. There's a lot here. The first one is just informational. It's the count. As I let it play, you notice that'll update. The next one is the lifespan, which is important because the more particles, the longer you let this play, the more particles are produced. The more particles are produced, the more Maya has to keep up with. And you could potentially have millions of particles in your scenes, and that each one of those has a position in XYZ space. The idea is it can become a real drag on your system. So it's not always a good idea to have tons and tons of particles when you have the option to have them die off over time. You can have them live forever, and usually Maya can handle it up to several thousand without having a drag issue. But I like to give it a random range where it says this First, let's do a constant, and we can say after 1 second they all die, and we can see what that looks like. So they're created, and they last from the point that they're created. They last 1 second, which is neat. And they're constantly being created, so there's always some on the screen at any given time. And we could change that to 3 seconds. And so you see they're all dying by about the time they... This is something that might work for our purposes. Something I do like is you're able to put a random range. So it's the lifespan, and this lifespan random is, you can give it a value, let's say of 2, and what that does is says, oh, you can die off at 2 plus or minus the lifespan. So I could die off as early as 3 minus 2, or 1. 3 minus 2 is 1, or I could die off as late as 3 plus 2 is 5. And it's going to give a lot more variation in when these particles die off. Some die off really soon, some die off later. My particles seem pretty heavy in the scene, so I might try to look further down to see how we can lighten those up. But I might change this to 2 and 1. Let's see. Looks like they're dying off right before they get to the bottom. So maybe a 2.5. Alright, so I hope you see what lifespan is doing. We're controlling when those particles, from the point they're created, how long do they live, plus or minus a value. Particle size, I think 0.2 is a little large. We could go like a 0.1. That may be a little more snow size. We'll come back to that. I'm not going to play with the radius scale at this time, or collision, dynamic properties. You can animate and bring forces in the world, and wind, and there's a lot of things you can do here. But this is the one, dynamic properties. This is where we can set the weight, so we can see things. I might take the radius back up to 0.2, and as you take the weight up and down, it's going to affect how fast they fall. So I can take this down to 0.5. And usually that's coupled with its mass. So if I take the mass down to 0.2 and the weight to 0.5, and they're starting to be kind of falling a lot slower. To me, that seems like kind of a lazy snow. But if I do that, it seems like now I need to increase the lifespan on those. So I'm going to grab my emitter and pull that down. They seem a bit high too, and then maybe go up to where was it? The particle shape, and lifespan. Let's take that back up to about 3 and maybe 1.5, and see if that's long enough. To me, it still doesn't seem like it's long enough. And most of the snow is happening behind him. So let's go ahead and make this 5 here. That should be plenty. And if it goes through the ground, that's fine. I would like some to die off before they hit the ground. And you see how these are going up and then coming down. That doesn't look very snow-like to me. So I'm going to go back to the emitter, and instead of a positive y, I'm going to do a negative 1. So they should all be going with the flow of gravity now, which means I'm going to have to move my emitter up above him again. but before they were going up and then being controlled by gravity, coming down, kind of like a water fountain. But now we're just going to have them kind of pouring out, all coming straight down. And I'm going to go to a top view and just center my emitter so that it's going to stay in the scene at the entire time. Okay, it seems like they're getting close to the edge, and the max distance, I might take that down to 18 or so. Alright, I hope this is making sense. I know the first time I was exposed to particles, it took me a while to get it. There's so many things going on. You may be like me, and if you are, that's fine. Basically, there are emitters, and then there's the particle shape which you adjust.